Okay, here's a quick demo on how to open an image from Lightroom as a smart object into Photoshop and add a dodge and burn layer. I've got my image here in Lightroom. I want to show you that before I did any editing, the image looked like this: very bright sky, very dark foreground. With my edits, it now looks like this. That would include my basic adjustments, where you can see I've lowered the highlights and brightened the shadows. I've brightened up the overall exposure just a tiny bit. I've added some clarity. I've added some vibrance. I also did my noise reduction and sharpening in my detail adjustments. And I added my lens corrections: remove chromatic aberration, enable profile corrections, things that we should do to every single image. So my image is ready to go. And now I'm going to go to the photo menu, down to edit in, and I'm going to choose open as smart object in Photoshop. And now the image is open in Photoshop. You will see that I only have one layer in my layers palette, and I want to bring your attention to there is a little icon at the bottom of that thumbnail, and that indicates that that image is a smart object. Why do I want it as a smart object? Because if there's anything that I now want to do to the entire image in terms of changing the contrast, changing the color balance, any number of things, rather than add an adjustment layer for the entire image, all I have to do is double click that little icon, and the image will open back up into Adobe Camera Raw, which we see here, and now I can do further adjustments. For instance, a lot of people like to add a curve for contrast. You can do that in Adobe Camera Raw right here, and it's better than doing it in an adjustment layer. So if I want to add a little bit of overall contrast, I can do that here with a curve, and it's better for my raw file than if I did that in Photoshop with a layer that has no mask. And when you do that and you click OK, Photoshop now updates that smart object and your image looks different over the entire image. But what about local adjustment? What if I want to lighten or darken a few things? To do that, we're going to create a dodge and burn layer. And to start that layer, I'm going to go to the Layer pop-out menu and choose New Layer right here. By doing that, I'm going to be able to set a few options. I can't do those options if I simply go down and click the Add Layer button at the bottom of the Layers palette. So I want to go to this Layer pop-out menu, choose New Layer, and I've got a few things that I'm going to change. The first is I'm going to name this layer Dodge Burn. The second is I'm going to change the mode of this layer from normal to overlay. I'm sorry, to soft light. Use overlay for sharpening, soft light for dodging burn. And I'm going to check this little box that says fill with soft light neutral color 50% gray. That's going to make a gray layer. We want it to be a gray layer and not a transparent layer. And that's going to allow us to see our dodging and burning really clearly. So I'm going to click OK. I now have a gray layer in my layers palette that says dodge burn, and it's active. You can see the lines around it, tells me that that's active. While that's active, if I grab my brush tool, and in the options, I want normal mode and opacity down to about 10% or so, and flow maybe down to about 60%. Now I can paint on my image with white if I want to lighten. I'm going to lighten this pathway a little bit, so I want to switch my foreground color to white. And I'm going to click and drag over that pathway and lighten up that pathway. I'm changing my brush little by little as I go. I'm using the right and left bracket keys to change my brush on the fly. And so I've lightened that path a little bit. And now I'm going to switch over to black as my foreground color, which, by the way, you can do with the X key. I'm going to go with a really big brush, and I'm going to pass over the sky. I've got a pretty big brush. I want to make it a really soft brush, lower the hardness down to maybe just about 25%. And I'm going to pass over the sky several times and gradually darken it down. Now if you look at the thumbnail in the layer palette, and I will zoom in here, you can actually see where I have painted and where I haven't. That's a good reason for this layer to be gray and not transparent. If I turn only that layer on, you can see where I have painted as well. It kind of looks like rudimentary finger painting. But that all gets nice and hidden when we see it against the image. And so that's my dodge and burn layer on top of a smart object layer.